core beliefs that we can't even see, that we were taught to believe about ourselves. When we were children, messages got pressed into the wet cement of who we are, of our soul. And those messages we can't see, but they become sort of the virus infecting the operating system. And so my goal, my task is to reach down your throat and begin to pull out those messages.
What makes a relationship happy? We're going to get into that. Sven, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Bert. It's great to be on. I appreciate you having me on.
And so, first of all, I want to talk about just your overall thought on therapy, because you obviously are coming from a different angle. Because, first of all, your business is badass counseling. So talk about where you come from as far as how you see therapy.
Yeah, I think therapy can be a really effective tool in people's lives. I'm a big believer in it. I, however, was in a 12-year suicidal depression back in my 20s. And, it was almost 30 years ago. Actually, it was 30 years ago. And I just couldn't find a therapist that worked for me long-term. So I had to figure out my own way through it. And it took me years. I read about 1,000 books, from self-help to philosophy to theology to spirituality to new age to anything that would help. And I took bits and pieces here and found my own way out. And as a result, because I had already sort of been in the counseling field, I'm a former clergyman, and one thing morphed into the next. And before you knew it, I had my own counseling practice based on not the stuff that I had learned in books, but the stuff that I had used on myself. And I began to develop those tools more and more. And it's a much more aggressive approach, not aggressive as in hurtful, but for instance, I require all new clients to write an autobiography for me before we even start. I'll spend 2 to 3 hours studying that before we even have our first meeting so that we hit the ground running. First session is always a minimum of 4 hours or a maximum of 6 hours. I don't do 1-hour sessions. All follow-up sessions are a minimum of 2 hours, maximum of 4 hours. Because, and my practice presently is in Manhattan, New York City. I have clients around the world, but the people I deal with, and I actually think it's most people want this, people don't want results a year from now or 3 years from now. 50 minutes once a week is a model that's been used forever. And there are a lot of people that works for. I have no beef with it. It doesn't work for me. I believe people want results now. And I believe that they're willing to go deep. It's scary. I hear all the time from people, I can't sit still for 4 hours, let alone 6. How is this going to work? And well, by the time we get to the end of the session, they're like, holy shit, where did the time go? But it enables me to go much deeper, much more quickly, on top of the fact that I have their life story from their autobiography before they even darken my door or my Zoom account. And so we can move very, very quickly and go very deep. And so mine is an approach based on one fundamental belief, well, several, but not the least of which is that the decisions we make in life are very often driven by or in compensation for, and to look at them and identify them. And it's very scary stuff. I have clients who are CEOs down on Wall Street. I have had more military, war veterans, special ops people than I could even begin to count. And invariably, without exception, I hear, Sven, this is the scariest shit I've ever done in my entire life. And they've done 6, 7, 8 tours, whatever, in war, because they're going down to that childhood stuff and they're beginning to see not only what they were taught about themselves and about the world, but the implications of the fact that I was taught these things. So it's a much more aggressive approach, but in a loving way, in a very, very kind way. And I'm there to bring love to my clients, but to sort of do battle with the demons inside of them. And yeah, it doesn't work for everybody. It's not everybody's cup of tea, but for the people in life who are very intense or who just want results faster rather than later, it works.
Yeah, I love it. Well, what I like about your approach is the fact that I think most people that I know that have gone through therapy, including myself, that 50 minutes is a non-starter, because you're starting to work through. I mean, maybe the last 10 minutes of that 50 minutes, you're starting to, okay, I'm feeling comfortable with the situation. I want to talk about this, because as humans, we're always dealing with junk inside of us, and it takes a few minutes to be vulnerable and to, okay, I'm going to talk about this thing, and then right as you get comfortable, oh, time's up, we'll see you in a week. What?
Yeah, and that first the first half hour, the first 40 minutes, or the entire session is often spent talking about what's happened in my past week. So it becomes extraordinarily difficult to go very, very deep into the real shit driving the whole equation. And in terms of being vulnerable and developing trust, I get clients, even with me, the 6 hour initial session and then a few follow-up sessions. So we may be 3, 4 weeks, 5 weeks down the road, and they've done 12, 14, 16 hours with me now. And now they're trusting. Okay. And this is an intensive. Now they're opening up. Now it's like they feel comfortable really divulging. So the notion of eliciting a deep level of trust in 50-minute segments, Christ, that would take months and months and months. And let alone, what are you going to do with the weekly stuff? And you got to address that. And then how are you ever going to get back to that old stuff? So for me personally, and again, there are plenty of therapists who I'm sure make it work well. So I'm not disparaging the industry. I'm a big believer in the industry. The 1 hour model or the 50-minute model, or very often it's 45 minutes. For me, it's just like, no fucking way. No, thank you.
Right. Yeah. I love your way better already. Again, that 1 hour session, however you split it, 45 minutes, 50 minutes, 55 minutes, people are just getting started warming up. They're starting to open up, and then it's time to go. And it's just, to me, it's a broken system. I prefer your system better already, because minimum, you need a couple of hours just to really lay the cards on the table. And maybe if you're lucky, you can identify, oh, I've identified this one thing. Can you help me with it? And what's interesting also listening to you is when you look at, you mentioned books, thousands of books. When you look at the self-help industry, the personal development industry, whatever you want to call it, I want to say a huge segment of that industry is based on finding that limiting belief, extracting that limiting belief, and replacing it with more empowering beliefs, right? That's the whole crux of the whole self-help, personal development genre. And for most people, it takes some years. I mean, I hear people all the time where they've read, again, hundreds, if not thousands of books, and they don't feel they're better off, or they're maybe slightly better off. And I think a lot of it is because they haven't yet identified, like you said, the programming that was crammed into that wet cement. And for a lot of us, it just takes forever. All right, so let me ask you this. In one of your TikToks, let me see if I have the skill set to bring it up, if not my...
So here's a fucked up little nugget for you. You want to know what the single biggest determinant of whether you'll be unhappy or happy in your relationships is? Over 30 years of counseling people, and this is all types of relationships. This is boss subordinate, friend to friend, lover to lover. It boils down to simply this. How do you define strength? And I know you're looking at me thinking, what the fuck does how you define strength have to do with happiness in a relationship? It's simply this. Those that are unhappy in relationships generally define strength as the ability to take it. I can take it. Oh, I can endure more. I can endure more. Versus the people who are happy in relationships define strength as the ability and courage to stand up and say no. To stand up when things are wrong, when they're not being treated well, when their needs, wants, and feelings are being minimized, versus just taking it and eating the other person's shit and making it all about their wants, needs, feelings, expectations. So which camp do you fit into? The unhappy or the happy? And at what point do you realize, holy shit, maybe I need to change my definition of strength?
Talk about this strength, this idea that our happiness is based on strength. How did you come up with this idea?
I just experienced that so much of my work is about helping victims of their own past begin to develop a life that actually makes them happy. And so much of what so many people have been conditioned to do is take it and take it and take it. And that love means giving, 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 this much, hoping I'll get this much love in return, because that's what they've been conditioned to believe is normal in their childhood, or all they can expect. They were taught, either it was modeled for them or was explicitly stated, you don't matter, I matter, you need to give love to me. So then when these people walk into adulthood, and I was this way, this was me in my first marriage. When you walk into adulthood, you're giving, just hoping to get some in return. The problem is that very often that person, what I call the extreme giver, ends up with an extreme taker. Someone who's happy to take and take and take because of their own conditioning and their terror of opening up and giving. All right. Some people call them narcissists. I call them extreme takers. And so what has to happen is the person who is the extreme giver over years, over decades in marriages, that in a marriage that they're taking so much shit and they think they have to because they've been conditioned to believe that's all I'm worth, or that's all I can expect, or I'm too terrified to leave and find something better. And so what has to shift inside of them is this belief that strength is determined by how much I can endure. And instead, strength ultimately is the courage to put your feelings out there and not back down, to stand up for your needs, to say no. And I get so many clients saying, well, Sven, I do stand up. I say, yeah, but the problem is you back down. To truly stand up, to find your no, is to stand up and not back down. And that's a different type of strength because it's scary. Some people excel at metaphorically taking the punches to the face, but it's a whole different type of strength to stand up and throw the punch, metaphorically speaking, and say, no, you cannot treat me this way, because the terror is that they'll walk away, or that they'll push back, or that they'll say, no, your needs don't matter, which is precisely the message you've been getting your whole life. Your needs don't matter. And it's so painful to be reminded of that message. And so what ultimately has to happen, what invariably has to happen, is that the pain of taking it and taking it and taking it and taking it has to get so bad that you finally get so sick of it that you find your no. That the pain, in fact, becomes your greatest teacher and your greatest motive, not just teacher, really your motivator. You just are sick of it. I'm not going to take it anymore. And that's when lives begin to change. And I always tell people, you really don't have to force your change. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to say, oh, I got to get up the gumption to stand up to this person. I always tell them, if you're not ready, you're not ready, and that's okay. But here's the thing, your pain is going to get worse. It is. This shit doesn't magically heal itself. And it's going to get bad to the point where eventually you do find the strength, at what I call the fuck it point, where just yesterday it was like, oh, should I, shouldn't I don't know. And then you reach a point where the pain gets so bad, you just say, fuck it, I don't even care anymore. I'm going to do it. And you have a strength you didn't have yesterday. You have a clarity you didn't have yesterday.
You know, that reminds me of man, the first of all, listening to you, I'm thinking, you just described, I want to say, the average mom. Mm-hmm. Right? Moms put themselves at the bottom of the list, and they give and they give and they give. And there's this almost tacit agreement, or I don't know, this idea that in order for you to be a mom, you have to be on it all the time, and you can't take any time away. You can't, you're a bad mom if you decide to have some me time. That is changed over I want to say the last couple of decades, but it's still kind of foreign. I still meet a lot of moms that put themselves last. They are in that extreme giving mode, and this idea that they're less than if they decide to start, giving themselves some time, or some what do you call it, self-love. And then the other thought about this idea of strength, as a veteran yourself, I work with several veterans groups, and I'm thinking there's, again, this implication in our veterans, and even our active soldiers, to take it and take it and take it, right? You are to do, and to do or die kind of a situation. And there's a lot of veterans out there that need help, that should be getting help, but they feel as though it's weak to ask for help. I mean, this idea that strength is having enough nerve to say, hey, I'm not going to take this anymore. This is what I deserve, either in the boss-employee relationship, in the marriage relationship, in the whatever relationship. I love this idea that if you're really a strong person, then you're going to stand up for yourself. You don't have to be rude about it, but we've seen the headlines when somebody I'll just say an extreme case where you have these women who were abused for years and they finally explode. They can't take it anymore. And what do? They kill their husband. And so I'm using that as an extreme example, but from one extreme to the other, this idea of strength is incredible. It is something that I've never thought of, but it makes total sense. Once you hear it, you go, yeah, that's
yeah. And in the end, in any relationship, obviously it's some of both. I mean, there is in any relationship, I'm not always going to get all my needs met all the time, or it's not always about me. And so there is give and take. But yeah, it's that willingness to stand up for my own needs. And as you mentioned, with regard to veterans, or with regard to mothers, and it's fathers too, and it's not even just in the parenting, it's in the relationship that undergirds the parenting, and that's the marriage, or that created the family. It's the belief that in the end, it's got to become the belief that my needs matter. But what leads up to that, the reason people are eating it and taking it is ultimately, it's always fear. It's always fear. They're terrified of standing up for their own needs. To your example, the wife/mother, terrified that if I stand up for what I want, you may not like me. You may walk away. You may give me backlash. Or in the case of the veteran, or many people who become our soldiers and sailors and airmen and so forth, they've been so conditioned to believe that their worth is found in serving other people. And that can be very powerful conditioning. And that's not a bad thing to a degree. It's not an effective model for relationships. It's not an effective model even for parenting, and especially marriages. Yes, there's the taking it. Yes, no doubt about it. But if you're not replenishing, if you're not refilling your gas tank, if you ultimately don't matter, you're going to become so miserable. And this is why, in working with veterans and soldiers and so forth, so many of them, it takes until their 30s, their 40s, their especially 40s, but it takes a while that old belief system of just be strong all the time, and I can take it, and I need to serve everyone else all the time. It has to get beaten down by life. And I always tell people the soul is more powerful than the will. Every 20-year-old, a lot of 30-year-olds think, well, I'll just willpower through it. But talk to that same guy in his 40s or his 50s, or that same tough woman in her 50s, and let's see how strong that willpower is. That's why I get so many people. Yeah, I get young people too, but they still think they can willpower through things. But the pains, the core beliefs that were pushed into the wet cement of your soul, the shit you were taught about yourself, the rocks, this 500-pound bag of rocks on your back from all this stuff that's been inflicted upon you over the course of a lifetime. You may be strong enough to carry it when you're 20, but do that for 20 more years. Then tell me about your willpower. So these young guys in their 30s giving advice to these even younger guys in their 20s and teens, it's like, give it some time. Let's see how tough you are in your mid 40s or your early 50s. And now you've got, all sorts of different elements, but you've got all that pain weighing down on you from inside. And so it's a different element. And that's why very often life just has to break us.
Yes.
That's when we become humbled, but more importantly, that's when we open to the notion that I want help, not just I need help, but I want help. I can't do it by myself, and open to new belief systems about ourselves and about life. And unfortunately, sometimes we have to be broken by life before we're truly supple, truly ready to take on a new way of thinking.
Sure. What's the old saying? When the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And one of the things that just came to mind is I can't remember what the study, but there's a study out there. I don't know if it's a full-blown study, but there was an article I read many years ago that the average person becomes free of their hangups, or most of their hangups, meaning they finally stop giving a crap about what other people think about them between the 35s and 40s, right? When life has beaten you down long enough where you say, fuck it, I don't care anymore.
Yeah, there that mid 30s age, and I've written on this before, but I'm not the originator of the concept. But yeah, it very often happens then. It's not limited to then. It can happen earlier. Very often it happens much later. I have clients in their 60s and 70s struggling with that exact same thing. It depends on how powerfully it was pressed into them as children. But yeah, a lot of times that's when life sort of starts to catch up and take its toll. Yeah.
Let me ask you this. What do you say to people who are maybe they're struggling with depression, but they don't know why? I mean, on paper, they have a great life, a nice, they have a great marriage, great job, career's going great. On paper, they look good, but they're depressed. What do you say to somebody who's depressed and they cannot figure out why?
That's 99% of my clients, depressed or anxiety driven or both, and they don't know why. I tell them the same thing. I tell them all the same thing, and it undergirds, most of my work. You have fears, pains, and BS beliefs you've been taught about yourself deep inside of yourself, and you either can't see them or you can see them, and you're fucking running as fast as you can to get away from them. And until it's like this tidal wave of all that crap that's chasing you, and you're running, or you're medicating yourself, gambling, cheating, pills, booze, overworking, overparenting, over creating chaos around you, anything to keep your focus off of that tidal wave. Because if I stop, it'll wash over me. And until you actually turn into it, until you actually go into the pain, the fears, and the bullshit beliefs you've been taught about yourself, you'll be fucking miserable. That's what the depression is. Fundamentally, what the depression is, it's all the pains that were inflicted on you, and especially all the BS beliefs you're taught about yourself that are packed down on top of your authentic voice, your original true self rising up from within. So it's like a little baby robin in the nest with its mouth open, and mama robin comes in and jams that fucking worm down there. So these messages have been jammed down your throat while your own soul has been trying to come up its whole life with your authentic voice. And those two things meet, and that grating, that's creating that anxiety. That's creating that depression. It's like tectonic plates below the surface. Well, what happens when two opposing messages underneath the surface grate against each other? It's earthquakes on the surface. And you can hold that shit down. You can control that shit on the surface for a while, maybe even a few decades. But eventually, that pain, the soul always wins. And it will grow and it will take over your life. So that's why, where I am in Manhattan, I've had practice for 30 years, the last 10 years in Manhattan. And I have clients, from Washington, D.C. to Hollywood to around the world, New York City, Wall Street, who have it all. They have it all times 1,000. And they can't figure out why they're fucking miserable inside, or why their son wants nothing to do with them, or why they've lost, 3 marriages, or whatever it is, or why they've blown up their career. And it's this shit inside that they've tried to run from. And at some point, you got to face that shit, and people don't want to. And that's why some clients, when I take them down there quickly, whether it's in the first session or the second session or the third session, some bolt. They don't want to. It's too scary. And that's why I always tell people, I'm not doing the work. When we're in session, if I've had a great session with the client, I always tell them, I didn't do the work. I just asked the questions. You did the work. And I know how scary this shit is. I was in a 12-year suicidal depression. I've got the 9-inch scars up my arms to prove it. I know how scary this stuff is. It's terrifying to go down here and to look at the messages that were forced down and why they were forced down your throat, and whose agenda and why that was their agenda. And that's when belief systems start to explode. That's when they begin to see mom for who she really was, or dad for who he wasn't, or whatever it might be. And it's terrifying. But that's where life begins. There's that great quote from the movie The Natural with Robert Redford and Glenn Close. And Glenn Close's character turns to Robert Redford's character and says, we each get 2 lives, the life we learn from, and then the life we live. And it's at that juncture. It's not just enough to say, fuck it, and I'm going to move forward. That until all that shit, all the pain, fear, and bullshit beliefs you've been taught about yourself, until those are out of you, you're still just faking it.
Man, that's incredible. And that is one of my favorite movies. I love the Glenn Close character because she was such an anchor, such a great sounding board. She was almost mystic with her, the way she approached life. She was an awesome character in that movie. All right, let's talk about this. You have a book out. It's doing extremely well on Amazon. There's a hole in my love cup. Talk about There's a Hole in My Love Cup. What inspired you to write this book?
It's just about 80% of my counseling method in one book. What inspired me to write it is I had so many clients who were overseas in war and or had been, or people who just for whatever reason couldn't come and be my client. And so I wanted to just make it as accessible as possible. And it's all of my theories right there in one book. Not all, but about 80%. And I wrote it about 5 years ago, and it's become a bestseller. And audiobook, ebook, whatever, paperback, it's all there. We're now getting it into a few other languages. And it's fundamentally this, that when you are taught that you don't matter, you're not good enough, or you're unlovable, and or you're not wanted. When you are taught those things, it has different effects on your love cup. We're all going through life just trying to get our love cup filled. And one of those messages in particular, the most powerful one, has the effect of basically puncturing a hole in your love cup. So it doesn't matter how fucking much love you pour into that love cup, how many people, your lovers, friends, boss, no matter how successful you are, it's all just draining out the bottom. And because you've been taught, such things as you don't matter. Well, fuck, it doesn't matter how much love you get. So this is the person who's always trying to hoard more and more love, oftentimes from even their own children. And until that is repaired, and that hole in the love cup is driven by this belief. So the belief systems have to be identified and changed. And anyway, so that's why I wrote the book, to make it very accessible. And then that's also why I've made about 800 plus free videos on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and so forth, to make it as accessible as possible. I worked with the homeless and lived among them, slept on concrete every night for 2.5 years. And so I've been very committed to helping poor people. It's a big part of what I do. And so I just try to get as much content out there to try to help people, breaking it down into tiny little nuggets that really punch them in the face and force them to begin to, and help them to begin to pull out all the pain out of a love cup that's been packed with shit and manure and rocks and crud. And that stuff doesn't go out the bottom. The love goes right out the bottom, but all the crud stays right in there. And so my goal, I guess I'm in the business of washing dirty cups and repairing the bottoms. That's what I do.
Love that. Okay, now when you say you worked with a homeless, were you homeless for a couple of years, or was this something that you experimented with?
It was no experiment. I literally drained my bank account and gave away all of my life possessions. And I moved to Oakland, California, and said, let's get into it. And so I literally went on the street with nothing, the clothes on my back. I think I brought a spare shirt, a spare pair of underwear, and then built my own little mini life, sleeping on concrete every night, 2.5 years. And I just did, as I said, I'm a former clergyman, Lutheran pastor. And so I just did ministry by walking around. I wasn't building any programs. I was just listening, talking, listening, basically bringing my counseling skills. And this was back in my 40s. I'm in my mid to late 50s now. And I felt called to do it. And it was insane. It was fucking ridiculous. And it was one of the best experiences of my life. I'd always been active in working with homeless and runaway youth and, gay, lesbian, trans communities, especially ones where people have had to leave their home because they were rejected. But then to go in and live among the homeless, and it was fantastic. And I learned so much. And our human problems are universal, that they are, yes, there are systemic problems hurting the poor and so on and so forth, indisputable. But the core human longings are universal. There's a great quote by what's his name? Not Robert Fuller. What the hell's his name? He was a Harvard professor of psychology. He's known as really the father of American psychology from back in the 1920s. Not Fuller. What the hell was his name?
Not Erickson.
No. Anyway, and he said that which is most personal is most universal. That at the deepest levels, and this is true of great art, that really, truly great art, whether it's music or whether it's dance or sculpt, whatever, that it speaks so deeply. It's the artist revealing his or her deepest self. And it resonates inside of us because, damn, that's my experience. Well, we all have these universal experiences of wanting to be seen for who we really are, wanting to be accepted, fear of getting hurt. All of these things are universal experiences. And that was one of the grand lessons that I learned on the streets of, living on the streets. It's like, it's the same shit as my clients who are, drawing in, 9, 10 figures.
Yeah, that's incredible. I think that you've hit the nail on the head as far as this idea that what's most personal is universal. That's absolutely true. And I think this idea of the fixing our love cups is also universal, because ultimately that's all what we want, is we want to be loved for who we really are, not for the fake version of us.
Right. And the challenge of being loved, I always tell people, and I've done, videos on this on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and so forth. The grand challenge, we all want to be seen for who we really are and be accepted for who we really are. And Cameron does such a great job of that in the movie Avatar. They don't say, I love you. They say, I see you. I see you. We all long to be seen for who we really are and have that person stay. But the price of being seen for who I really am and the person's thing is that I have to have the courage to show who I really am. Well, now this is where we separate the men from the boys, because so often people don't want to, they're terrified to reveal who they really are. Why? Because they've been conditioned to believe their whole life that who you really are doesn't fucking matter. I'm the parent, or I'm the authority figure, or who you are is bad, or your voice doesn't matter, or your feelings, your wants don't matter. And so this person becomes, if they can even identify what their feelings, wants, needs are, if they can even do that, then the second step is having the courage to put it out there, when in the past they've been assailed, they've been attacked for who they really are. So while we simultaneously long to be loved for it and appreciated for it, it requires the courage, and the immense courage, to begin to put it out there. And that's scary. And especially in adulthood, not only what happened in childhood, but if you've been rejected in love, or you've been cheated on, or you've had somebody leave you, it's terrifying to open up again. And this is why this notion of doing the work, whether it's therapy or self-care or whatever it is, doing the work of flushing out the pain, the fears, and the bullshit beliefs you've been taught about yourself, because that's what's blocking you from opening up again.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. I want to talk about one of your other books. By the way, just to give out your website here, and of course I would put this all in the show notes as well. It's badasscounseling.com. Correct. And you have multiple books there. One of them, which is very intriguing, is I Steal Wives. Talk about why you created this book. What is the meaning behind this title?
Sure. My sort of greatest sin in life, the most pain that I've inflicted, my addiction, if you will, when I was younger, and it ended in my early 40s, was that I'd been cheated on in 2 long-term relationships. I cheated on one person in a long-term relationship, and I was the person that a great many people cheated with in their relationships, a lot. And not proud of it, but it's done. And I learned from it. And I began to see patterns. I was a mathematics major at an engineering university for most of my undergraduate degree. And I suck at math, but I'm pretty good at seeing patterns in and particularly in humans. And I began to see patterns in the people that I was cheating with, who were cheating on their spouse, their lover. But not only that, because I'm a natural sort of question asker, it's what I do, or it's what I like to do, I find people interesting, I began to dive deeper and deeper into the people who were cheating on their spouses, and I began to see patterns there. Well, I don't sleep with men generally, not that there's anything wrong with that. The book is fundamentally an assessment of female infidelity from the perspective of the person they're cheating with, based on the questions and patterns that I began to see. And few things are more under-researched and under-reported than female infidelity. So any numbers we have, boy, there's not much science that's been done on any numbers we have. And so my insights that I believe were very credible, all case study based, personal experience based, were pretty fucking fascinating. And so this is why when I'm now in my work with infidelity, and I do a lot of work, I specialize in a few areas. Suicide is one, infidelity is another one, cheating is another one. And I really, because I've experienced this, someone who was cheated on twice in a long-term relationship, and I cheated once, and I was the one being cheated with, I've experienced it from all sides of the triangle, personal experience. And so I'm some unique insights in that book.
And is that book for women? Is that book for couples? Who's the target audience of that book?
Well, women and men, because very often the men that I've had who wanted to read it because their spouse was cheating, they feared their spouse was cheating, or they fear their spouse might cheat. The women I've had read it, at least the ones who have reached out to me or that I've counseled subsequent to their reading it, they want to know why they're doing it. Why am I doing this? What the hell is going on inside of me? And one of the absolute fundamental premises of that book, as well as the book you mentioned earlier, There's a Hole in My Love Cup, is that, and I spend a chapter on this in the Love Cup book, it's that any problem that occurs within a relationship, within a marriage, predates that relationship. Any problem in the marriage predates that relationship. In other words, the problems that are existing in the marriage, especially cheating, are driven by factors, are driven by beliefs, pains, and fears that incubated, that were put in you long before you ever met this person. Everything is a response to that shit, especially cheating. So when people say,
hold on. Mm-hmm. My mind is blown. That makes total sense, because just to hear that quote again, how did you say it?
Every problem that exists within a marriage predates that relationship. It doesn't just predate the marriage, like, oh, it goes back to when we were dating. No, it predates you ever even knowing that person. Everything in that relationship is a response, not to that person, but to that shit from back there. It's like the person who, twists their knee and it really fucking hurts. Okay. Or no, let's do something even easier. I hit a curb with my car, and it knocks my alignment of my front tires out of whack. If I do not repair that, every system in my car is going to be affected. The alignment of my other tire, the wear and tear on my rear tires, my axle strength, my rods, my pins, the fucking gas mileage is going to be affected. Oil, everything's going to be affected. Everything's a compensation for that. And that's just a fucking tire out of alignment, right? So it's the same way. One of the things I tell people is that no child comes out of the womb thinking I suck. They don't. My brother's wife was a neonatal nurse for 30 years. She's worked at a very well-known hospital in the Midwest. She's worked with conjoined twins, children that had a vestigial tail, all men, the smallest of the small babies, etc. And I've asked Amy before, Amy, what percentage of children that come out of the womb are bad? She's like, that's the dumbest fucking question I've ever heard. None of them. Oh, so no child comes out of the womb inherently bad. That means any belief systems, gee, I suck, gee, I'm no good, gee, I'm not good enough, gee, I'm king of the world. All of those are conditioned throughout that childhood. And that's the shit that's going to fuck up your marriage. That's the shit. And so especially, it's never more true than with cheating. That the cheater is fundamental. The problem isn't the marriage. That's a cop-out to say, oh, I cheated because you're not giving me the love I want. Fuck you. You could have fucking quit the relationship if you're not getting, but you chose to cheat. No, what's really going on is your love cup is so full of dog shit and rocks, and there's a gaping hole on the bottom. And all of that goes back to way back there. But you don't want to look at that stuff. You just want to get more love poured into you. You just, it's the classic, everybody says narcissist, narcissist, narcissist. Everybody loves to use that phrase nowadays, but that's what it is. And it all goes back there. And that person wasn't born that way. And a lot of people say, oh, a narcissist is born that. No. Extreme takers are created. They are not born that way. Anyway, we just hit about 5 different fucking points there.
Oh my gosh. Wow. I love that. Yeah, that's incredible. And you know what's interesting? I've said this for years. At least in America, you pay a fee to get a marriage license, right? It's part of the deal. What's always impressed me is there should be some training with that license. If you and I want to drive a car, we have to get a license and we have to have some training. Maybe it's minimal training, but we have to pass a test to make sure that we understand how to operate the basics of that vehicle. If you want to be a counselor, you have to have a license. There's testing involved. But anybody can marry anybody, pay this licensing fee, and you're good to go. And I've always said, man, it would be nice if the government made some kind of testing requirement, some kind of relationship testing, something where the couples have to sit down and at least identify some of the what do you call it, the good, the bad, and the ugly, because otherwise they're just wasting. I don't want to say they're wasting their time. Otherwise, it's going to be a surprise. Right. To your point, you're walking into a relationship with all of this baggage, whether you're 20 or 40 or 60, you're bringing all this crap with you. You're bringing your broken love cup. That's right. And your new spouse has no idea. Nobody, both couples have no idea what baggage is being brought. And so anyway, that's kind of my point, is that the government, if they're going to make you get a license, they should have you they should have you sit down and at least talk about finances. There's a lot out there said about love languages. What are your love languages? What are your goals? Something. Anyway, that's kind of my thought on that. We're out of time. I want to thank you so much for stopping by. Some of the nuggets that you dropped, some of the love bombs have been outstanding. My mind has been blown a couple of different times. One more time, I want to give out your website. It's badasscounseling.com, badasscounseling.com. Sven, thank you so much for stopping by. Looking forward to having you back again, my friend.
Thanks so much, Bert. Have a kick-ass day.